right, so let's go ahead and get started. My name is Virgilia Pruthi, and for the next 4 hours, we're going to be learning about building and communicating roadmaps. So before I get started, and I'm wearing a jacket because I hail from Arizona, and this is way too cold for me. So I heard that I think it's supposed to get super warm in here, so just go ahead and play around with the heater if anything happens. Before we get started and I dive into the agenda, I just wanted to understand the pulse of the room. So how many of you all are already product managers? Okay, most of you. And for those of you who aren't, what discipline are you in right now? Product, okay, got it. Project management, cool. Any others? Do we have any engineers or design? Cool. Development. Okay, awesome. And for those of you who are not PMs right now, is it your desire to get into PM? Yeah? Okay. Well, you are honestly already a PM, so I hate when people do that. It's truly the same. All right, so what I wanted to do right now is just what are some of the topics that you hope to learn today? Because if I don't cover it in the session today and we have a little time at the end, I'll try to kind of squeeze through those topics as well. So just go ahead and raise your hand or shout out if you have any specific things you want to learn about. As PMs, you guys have to be loud and outspoken, so go ahead and just like yell it out. Product roadmap. Okay, wonderful. Thanks. Any other ones? Nothing? You guys already are good? You trust me? Okay. Well, if you, along the way, if there's something that you want clarity around, in my opinion, the way to get the majority out of this for you all is to just have more activities and be more session-based. So we'll really make sure to make it interactive. And if you have any questions along the way, please raise your hand, just ask a question. I've tried to insert as many breaks as possible. When Wade and Andrew first saw my presentation, they said they have to at least get up for like 5 minutes. So if you feel like you just need to get up around, just go ahead. I heard the bathrooms are on the first floor, so you might have to take a little bit of a trip there. All right, let's get started then. So the agenda, sorry? Okay, that too. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Today, I'm going to cover the basics, right? So we're going to go into, as PMs, what are our real roles? I mean, I'm sure you hear so many different things, and PMs' roles are always so vague, right? We have various titles, et cetera. So really, what is the purpose of what we do? Roadmap, why is it important? And what exactly is it, actually? We're going to go into how do you create a roadmap that actually maps back to your company's goals, which you would think would be obvious, but many times it's the first thing we forget to do. Understanding metrics and KPIs, and then actually going into crafting your roadmap. So the first thing I want to say is there really isn't one perfect way to create a roadmap. So whomever has told you that there is a perfect template to it is just lying, right? Like the roadmap's purpose, which we're going to get into, is to tell a story. And if you can tell a story in whatever means you can, that's perfect. I will provide some tools that you can utilize if you'd like to. However, it's more about the thought process and how you are actually developing your story as opposed to just a PowerPoint presentation. So we're going to go into the roadmap, impacts, all that, resourcing and tech debt, which is, I know, always a PM's the best thing that they always hear. And how do we actually prioritize roadmap items, and going a little bit into working backwards. So I work at Amazon, and working backwards, I don't know if any of you are familiar with the working backwards methodology at all? No? Okay, cool. So I will not make it so Amazon-y, but I will stress that it's a wonderful way to think, and it's a great way to derive at a hypothesis and at a potential solution to what your roadmap should look like and be. So I'll kind of go through what and how we do it at Amazon and why we do it, so you can kind of learn those fundamentals as well. All right, so let's start off with introductions. My name, again, is Virgilia Pruthi. I am a product and strategy leader at Amazon. The titles mean really nothing there, as I'm sure they mean at your companies as well. At the end of the day, our goal is to make a huge customer impact and hit our revenue goals. And that's really what I stand for. I have a team of engineers and PMs as well. I'm based out of Austin, Texas, which is pretty awesome. So I get the best of both worlds there. I originally worked with Amazon, with Audible actually, in New York, and then moved over to Austin, Texas. I now work with Amazon Business. So Amazon Business is basically the B2B offering for Amazon. So if you think of any like big or small business, if you want to order anything from toiletry to health supplies to paper supplies, like we cover it all. Background, so, and the most important thing is if I look like I'm exhausted and I haven't slept in 14 weeks, it's because I have not. I have a 14-week-old daughter, and so this is the first time I'm talking about things beyond like burp clots, which would be really awesome. So my background is I've been in product management now for 7 years, working across various SaaS, e-commerce companies, working across 13 different countries, and with some brands like Weight Watchers, which has an amazing amount of data that you could do anything with it. It was just wonderful. Have focused on search, personalization, e-commerce, and growing SaaS to across like various different marketplaces. And again, been with Amazon now within 2 different divisions. I also had, prior to getting into product management, I had a company called Gen Juice. We were a millennial, I don't even know how to non-buzzword it anymore, but basically we provided content for millennials, and this was before Gawker and everything. And then we got acquired by a company who was interested in utilizing our data to help create products for millennials. So it was acquired by a company out of the Bay Area that works a lot with Procter & Gamble. Just about me, beyond product, baby. I really enjoy just making an impact, and that's what drew me into product management. Whether it's on people, on processes, or on revenue, is something that I'm incredibly passionate about. And I really, really am passionate about wellness and travel, which is why I'm already in love with Utah. I think it's an amazing, you guys have a lot of good local presence here too. So, all right, let's get started. Now, I know the tables are pretty big. So if you all could just partner up with hopefully someone you don't. So as PMs, I mean, we always assume that everyone is extroverted if you're a product manager, right? But that's absolutely not the case. And some of the best PMs I know are introverts by nature. However, putting yourself out there and really, making yourself uncomfortable, making sure you're meeting new people, talking, they do make a difference in your workplace as well. Because as PMs, you're always required to basically go understand other people's emotions. And being empathetic is the first way to go ahead and do that. So that's why I always force doing intros in the beginning, just to kind of get that out and start that process. So what does a PM do, right? You are at the epicenter of the business, okay? You have stakeholders coming from design who are really concerned about usability, naturally, right? You have folks from engineering really looking at the feasibility of the product, of the feature, of the launch. And then you have the business. You have sales, you have execs, you have CS, really looking at the viability of the business. Now, product, many times, I'm sure you all have seen this before, right? With the Venn diagram and all. And PMs are many times said to only look at viability. But we're really not, right? Because without all of these inputs, you cannot make a decision when it comes to your roadmap. You cannot make a decision as to what you want to do. So it's really up to you to look at all the various inputs coming in from the streams. So as PMs, I heard that about communicating upwards, across, et cetera. How do you determine whom and what you should be communicating out to, right? Product managers are really, really concerned about priorities. What are some of the things that you all are encountering now when it comes to making a decision? Like, who are the stakeholders that are really on your case, who you feel like it's really difficult to communicate outwards to them? For me, it's always been sales, right? Sales and product, it's almost like you have to create this different talk track and how you approach the sales team and how you handle them. So I can give you my own example as I kind of go along. Right before I actually went on maternity leave, one of the sales team within Amazon Business, they wanted to sign these really, really big customers, right? I'm talking about folks who are like Fortune 100 type businesses. And sales had overcommitted that we were able to launch a product prior to signing them actually in the contract. I'm sure you all have dealt with this before. And I had a literal timeline of having to leave before maternity started. So, all we have to do is understand, why did you promise that in the first place? Can you get on a call with the customer, right? You're almost like putting your therapist hat on and understanding what their opinions are, what happened, what were their triggers, and everyone has a trigger, right? For sales, it might be revenue. It might be when is a quarter closing, So just really having an understanding as to where they're coming from and why helps you formulate these priorities. So you have CS asking for things to reduce the amount of bugs that are coming in, right? Or reduce the amount of customer calls that are coming in. You have sales, again, looking at impact and revenue. You have engineering looking at technical debt. You have design looking at how do we make sure that we're at the forefront of others in our competitive space. You have PMs looking at how do I just make sure I can hit my roadmap dates, And you have execs wanting to make sure that either if you're in the IPO track, you're hitting your numbers, or if you're trying to get acquired, you're hitting your numbers, or if you are in debt, you're trying to just save your company. So everyone has their own inputs, and it's about how do you take all of them and formulate a story. All right, so I shouldn't even put this up. If you guys could define a roadmap, what would it be? What's the definition of a roadmap in your opinion? I'm gonna start calling on people if you guys don't. Yes, go ahead.
Your planned, outcomes for the year.
Mm-hmm. Awesome.
I'm gonna keep it short. That's it.
No, I love it. Good. Any others?
Product evolution.
Product evolution, very cool.
I was going to say kind of product evolution, but kind of where do you, I like to think kind of 3 to 5 years down the road in rough strokes.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Cool. So the technical definition is a plan that matches short-term and long-term business goals with specific solutions to meet those goals, right? So I love how you put it as an evolution, because it truly is, right? You're looking at short-term. Your roadmaps are going to be specific as you enter the next quarter, the next half, et cetera. And then you have to also think long-term. What's the 1, 3-year, 5-year track? And that's going to be more directional. So in a sense, you're almost creating like 2 or 3 different versions of this story. And again, trying to be very specific as you go more outwards is never the best idea, because how many of you all have set New Year's resolutions, and how long do they really last, right? Now, that's just for yourself, but when you're looking at a roadmap, it's not just you who's planning this out. You have so many different stakeholders that anything can affect it. And if you are a company that is, has customers, or you're a SaaS company, it's even harder for you to actually stick to a timeline. So really, really making sure that the key word in your mind is directional, and that's how you're selling it to other stakeholders is the best way to, in my opinion, to be. The reason that we have roadmaps and the reason that it is really helpful is for communication, right? It's another tool in the product manager's toolkit. It's a way that we communicate outward. In our minds, we have everything figured out naturally, right? Like if it's just you, your UX partner, your project manager, and your development manager, you guys have everything, and your QA manager, obviously, you have everything figured out. But beyond that unit, it's really, really essential to have a clear and concise roadmap to really speak outwards. And going back to the point of where should a roadmap sit, it's really about understanding your customers. Understanding your customers, number one, and understanding your stakeholders and what they're driven by, right? And connecting it back to the business, which we're going to go into a little bit more. So now we're going to get to the company's strategic objectives and why this is incredibly important. So let me give you an example. When you're working at a large company, which you have inputs coming from all different angles, right? And so many layers, that sometimes you forget that just because you are at a certain point in your career or at a certain level, you do have goals to connect back to. All of us are there for a singular purpose, right? And honestly, along the way, we let our egos or we let our opinions get in the way of just mapping it back to company goals. At a startup or a smaller company, this is incredibly, this is even more important because you're looking at growth. You're consistently looking at growth. So if you're not working on what the company actually needs at that point in time, then why are you working on it in the first place? So, cool. So the most common mistake that PMs normally make is that we don't connect it back to company goals, or we don't even know what company goals are. Now, there are some situations like, I worked at a company before Amazon, which if you go on my LinkedIn, you'll be able to see, but I'm not going to mention it right now. They didn't have a clear set of goals at all. So the product team actually drove the CEO to make a decision as to what are the 3 things that the company needs to work on in that given year, right? Having clear objectives is incredibly important, or else every team will be doing different things. And in my opinion, because the PMs are looking at the epicenter of usability, viability, and feasibility, it's up to us to really push that to happen. So do you all have this experience where the company hasn't set clear and concise goals at all? Yeah? And what do you all do right now? Do you just make up goals as you go along? Do you push back? Or what have been the techniques that you use? You make them up? Okay. Any other ones?
We focus on what our senior leadership in our group would like us to do.
You do? Okay. In your particular group?
In our particular group, we have prioritizations, and we align to those prioritizations. And those are our, like, we call it our top 10, which is fun, but like that's what we stick to.
And does it ever, are you in the product group then, or how is your group made up? Your digital product. So is there any conflict ever between the digital product group and the other teams as well? Okay, gotcha.
And especially when, I just had an example yesterday or the day before where someone put one of my digital products in their 4th quarter goals, and they're getting cost savings off of my digital product that was a pilot that we're not launching. So we launched it for about 8 clients, and we're not moving forward with it because it's not in our top 10, but it's in hers. When I read the email, I was like, happy New Year.
And that happens really, no, that happens really often, right? Like, there's also this like team separation where I'm in the product team, for instance, or this company I was talking about, you had like the product and engineering team where we would have our top 10, but then we wouldn't be aligned with sales or CS, and then that's where things get overpromised and under-delivered and clients get pissed off. So yes, it's really important to have a concise set of goals. So that's really easy to say, but how do you actually arrive at that opinion, right? So I'm sure you all have heard of the SMART technique, right? And I edited the words a little bit to make them more geared towards roadmap, but your KPIs for your roadmap, and in general for your company's goals, they should be specific, they should be measurable, they should be actionable, realistic, and time-bound. So is a good KPI saying that we want to have an exit by 2019? Probably not. It is time-bound, and you have some kind of like a vague goal in there, but there's no understanding as to, okay, we want our customers' trust level with us to increase by X percentage so that, and we can measure this by how they flow through our conversion, right? So being incredibly, incredibly specific so you can have analytics that can support that. And how many of you are familiar with vanity metrics at all? Okay, can you give me an example of a vanity metric?
Not off the top of my head, but it's just basically this stuff that's kind of storefront things that are like, they don't really matter, right? They're things that people look at, like right now, people look at, you know, historically you've looked at page views or visitors, right? It's like, okay, those are great, but what do those translate into, right? So they're kind of the things that, it's like your comfort blanket, right? Oh, I've just got these vanity metrics because that's what we've always looked at.
Yeah, no, that's a great example. And I'll give you one that we actually had when I first joined Amazon Business. So the initial product that I was overseeing when I joined was basically like the onboarding registration pathway into account management. So like even if you're thinking about Amazon retail, when you're signing on to when you sign up and then go through that whole pathway, that was kind of my product area. And when I had joined, our metric was number of customers. Like that could be anything, right? Anything could impact number of customers. I would love to take credit for that, but that is definitely not only onboarding. So what we had to do was like, what are the real critical factors in understanding how customers onboard, right? So I'm sure like just as consumers, you could think about what page, if you have a multiple page onboarding, what page is a drop-off at? And how can we minimize that, right? If you minimize drop-off, then your number of customers who sign up naturally will increase, right? And that will naturally increase your revenue at the end of the day. So really being specific and looking at what is your product actually at. So I want to take an example of someone's product. What's something that you all are working for that you would want to give us an example? How about yourself?
I don't know that I have.
What is the product that you work on?
Our internet-based analytics.
Okay, and so with analytics it's really important because what are the things that you need to measure and why?
It's not what we measure, it's what the customer measures.
What the customer measures. Got you. And if you don't understand your customer and if you don't understand what the metrics are important to them, then you can't determine the success, right? So a really good just cheat tool is the R technique, right? And it's acquisition, activation, retention, referral, or revenue. These are normally like the main standard KPIs that we look for. And the reason that these are incredibly important is your roadmap is built off of these, okay? If your company as a whole, they should normally have like 1 or 2 main triggers from the R technique. So for instance, if you're a growth company, you're looking at acquisition, right? What are all the things you can do to increase acquisition for your particular company? So your particular products, if they are relatable, they should be able to connect back to that company goal of acquisition. Does that make sense? Yeah? Okay. So we're gonna go ahead and do our first, yeah, go ahead.
So what is like your strategy for something that doesn't, it's a brand new product? Like how do you make something that's realistically measurable? You say, I want to, increase the number of users or whatever it may be. If it doesn't exist yet, what's your strategy to make a good KPI, I suppose?
So, no, that's a really great question. And obviously, okay, so let's talk it out, right? If you're a new product, what's the number one thing that you guys are going to be concerned of? Customers, okay. And when you're launching a product, are you going to go ahead and launch to the complete population, or are you going to set beta goals first?
Yeah, definitely.
Right? Yeah, so if you're setting beta goals first, then your KPIs could have out of the customers that we first launched with, what was their satisfaction around these particular items? What was their usage level around these particular items? Would they refer the company, the product, to additional users or other clients? So you're really looking at the acquisition and activation pieces of it, right? Those are the ones that are really critical for growth. Now, what are going to be vanity metrics for you are going to be what are the amount of publicity mentions you get on Twitter, those are vanity metrics, because we think that if a company suddenly gets coverage on, I don't know, Product Hunt, that it's the most successful product launch ever, and it's absolutely not, because they could probably have 50 users, and they might not even be converting. So you're really looking at acquiring those customers, referral, the usage patterns of the ones that you've already started. And if you're having a free to paid kind of a trial conversion piece, you could be looking at the ones that have actually converted and why they converted, right? So those are the ones that would be relevant for you. Does that make sense? Okay. Any other questions? Yeah.
So just piggybacking, Holly, off of your question. So I guess it sounds like understanding what you want or where you are with your product and kind of overall what you're trying to understand about your product is where you can look to the R technique and pull out the KPIs that you need to.
Exactly. And that's why it's important for the company, and I'm not saying companies have it figured out, right? C-level executives, it's always a hit or miss, and just judging by the amount of folks who said that you guys don't have clear company goals, it's always an issue. So it's up to us to really push back and just say, listen, we want to, as product people, launch the right things. We cannot do that until we understand where we're directionally headed, And sometimes you can guess, if a sales team is meeting with you all and they're saying that, listen, we need to lock down these clients because of X, you're looking at growth. right? If the CS team is saying we need to reduce the number of customer complaints, then you're really looking at retention, you know? So you can have a gut feeling, but that comes back to talking to other teams and really pushing back on your C-level execs to have clear and concise goals. All right, so we're gonna have our first activity. I hope you all can see. If you have questions, let me know. So you can go ahead and work, you know, within your tables. Like, use each other as just, you know, bounce ideas off of one another. But we're gonna go ahead, and if you guys don't have company goals, I want you to write them. If you were like the C-level executives, what would you have be the company goals for this next year? So what are your company organizational goals? What are the product goals or metrics for 2018? And I will go ahead and just pull the slide up so you guys can see the metrics as well. And then within your table, go ahead and share. If you want to work with the partners that you originally had, go ahead and do that too. Attempt not to share proprietary information if that's cool. But that is what I will say. Do whatever you want. Yeah, so I'll go ahead and give you guys 15 minutes, and then we'll have a breakout. I actually got a really good question about, you know, it's easy to push back on, it's easy to say that you want to push back on execs when it comes to like establishing company goals, but in reality that's a harder process or a harder challenge, right? So a couple of things that you can try if the C-level folks are like, whatever, we know what we're doing, is, you know, basically go and become your own champions and start to find who are the most essential partners in the company for you to actually have a successful product launch or a product, right? And whether that's sales or CS or marketing, whomever it may be, establish a repertoire with them. And at one of my previous jobs, I entered into a product which was basically like it was a shit show. Like, nobody wanted to touch the product. I did not know this before I was hired. Nobody wanted to touch the product. Everyone like, the first week I joined, one of my, the head of CS took a whiteboard, and he like drew on a whiteboard how quickly I will fail at my job and how quickly I will have to quit. I was yelled at by my devs like on my team who said, we don't trust product people, you guys just lie all the time. And this is the job I actually moved to Austin for. So, so that was wonderful. But at the end of the day, it's, again, about channeling your empathy and understanding who are those stakeholders that you need to align with. And the question I got was, if your C-level folks aren't going to really be attuned to changing it, then what can you do? At this particular company, it took me a quarter to gain trust across the different teams. And what I did was just like literally sat there and said, let's hold mini town halls with every single team. And myself, my SDM, my software development manager, and I partnered up, and we went to these different teams and said, what is it that you're challenged by right now? Like, do you agree with the goals that the company set forth? Do you agree with where the product is headed? If not, why? And we just listened to them for like a month. After that month was done, we went back to them. We said, okay, we've heard you guys out. If our C-level execs aren't going to change their goals, here's what we're proposing. Do you agree, disagree? If you disagree, why? We took another shot at reviewing our KPIs and our product goals for that year, basically. And you know, our product goals were like a quarter late, but we ended up figuring it out, so it's all good. We went back a third time, finally, and we were able to establish alignment with the CS team, the sales team, international, and marketing. And again, it takes a lot of time. I'm not saying it doesn't take time or investment. And once we did that, we then sent a cohesive, like basically email to our C-level execs, backed up by our head of product and engineering, and said, you know, we've met with all the teams, we CC'd all the heads of the teams, like the CMO, the CRO, on that particular email, and we said, this is what we've established, like, we would love to propose it, what do you think, can you let us try it out for like a quarter? And because this product was in such a bad state, they were willing to try anything. So they agreed. And it took about a year for us to gain that complete trust and get back to positive. But you know, we kind of had to do that back channeling a bit. So again, if you're not able to really get that support from your C-level execs, go back down a level and just start meeting with your counterparts. So. Okay, so starting to look at the roadmap. How many hours a quarter do you all spend on trying to create your roadmap? Ballpark. A lot, I'm assuming? None at all? How many revisions do you normally have on your roadmaps, if I can ask that question? Okay, that's really healthy.
Like the big milestones
Yeah.
are there,
Yeah.
but it stays pretty fluid.
Got it.
Yeah.
You said pretty much every time you open it up?
I did say that quietly.
I hear everything, by the way. So, you know, whether I've worked at a small company or a big company, the moment somebody other than you sees this document, it has changed, right? So it should be constantly a work in progress. The big milestones should not change, as you mentioned. But again, having that understanding that it will change, it will be directional, is a healthy way to look at it. But there are things that you can do to save time and efficiency. So I think I briefly mentioned that many times PMs are scared of things like, you know, tech debt and architectural changes. You know, you mentioned internationalization, you're looking at data centers, things like that. And are you all technical PMs? Are you business PMs? Like, just to understand, how many of you are technical PMs? Okay, so the majority of you probably haven't come from engineering before, right? And when you don't come from that technical background, it's really, really important that you learn to ask a lot of questions and stop pretending that you know everything and stop pretending that questions can be stupid. Because if you don't, then you will end up having conflicting priorities, right? So the ways that you can start to bucket these themes, bucket your roadmap themes, are the ones that go back to your top KPI levels, right? So you're talking about like internationalization. What are the key objectives that will go back to that? Is there anything that you need to do really, really fast that can help improve your customer satisfaction? And that's by understanding where your customer pain points are, any quick bug fixes, right? Or if you guys have changed to become ADA compliant, are there things on your app or on your site that are just not working? Or if you have launched a mobile app, are there things that are not working? Or are there spelling errors or things that are causing a lot of confusion on your site? Like, those are just like quick bugs that customers might get really annoyed about, but they could take like 2 dev days to just fix, you know? So making sure that's another bucket. And then tech investments. So this is incredibly, incredibly important. If you do not understand what your tech investments are for that year, you will end up becoming a feature factory, right? And a feature factory are basically products that keep releasing things, but don't go back and fix it or don't update their systems, all right? And I am not a technical product manager. I came from, my background is I did poli-sci in undergrad, went to business school, started a company, and that's how I ended up in technology. So I've learned that it's okay to ask a lot of questions because every product I've ever worked on has been technical. I did search, personalization, CMS, and now onboarding, which has a lot of technical parts to it. So I've learned to, A, rely on my development managers, rely on my on the devs on my team, but not let them take advantage of me either because they know I'm not technical. And prospects are really good because you can team up with sales to just literally listen on a call, or if sales is okay with it, even just having a set of questions that you and your UX partner have for the team and going and approaching these prospects. Talking to customers is the best way to understand what's going on with your product, right? And if you want to think about your customers as like the top, whatever, 10% of those who are attributing to your revenue, that's also important because are you really going to talk to every single person who has bought your product? Probably not, right? But really looking at the ones who are key ambassadors for your product. The next one is partnering up with CS. So it's really amazing that you have access to tools like Opinion Lab. Many companies don't because they don't want to spend money on research. Even the biggest companies with amazing amount of revenue, they just don't want to invest in having tools to help PMs, right? So what you can do is just team up with your CS counterparts, maybe even work with your dev team to give the CS team tools that they can help measure features and metrics on your particular product, which is a really great way of understanding more about what's going on. Sitting in on calls with the CS team or joining some of their meetings to understand where their top 10 things are. Product analytics. I know someone at that table mentioned like working with the BI team. So do you all have access to like business intelligence or data analytics in your companies? Utilize it. If you do not utilize it right now, I recommend sitting with them a day a week and just like understanding where the data is coming from. If there are some things that you're missing, go to the data science team, BI team, and say, I am looking to understand this. Can you help me understand this? And they will tell you, oh, we have this data that no one is using right now. If we pull a report for you, or if you can run this query, you can help to understand that, right? So just spend a lot of time with your BI or data science team. And if you don't have one, actually within my current team, our BI team is all distributed in India. And so we have a major time lag there, right? Like unless I wake up at 6:30 or 7 o'clock and have a meeting with them, I probably won't get access to them. And they get booked up real fast. So I've had to work with my engineering team to basically put analytics into place ourselves, get access to data warehouse so we can pull those queries ourselves, right? So really, really understanding if you have a good BI source, getting into those metrics. Understanding tech debt items from your engineering team, we've discussed that in depth. And then how many of you know what HIPPO means? Can you share it after you?
The highest paid person's opinion.
Yes, and why is following what the HIPPO says not the best thing to do?
Because often they don't have enough information.
Yes, exactly. So if you've done all of this research, right, and I didn't actually list marketing, which was my fault, but if you have a good marketing team, if you have a good product marketing counterpart, utilize them, right? They are attuned to what's going on in the competition, and many times sales and product marketing are so glued to the hip in a good scenario that they will have that kind of, resourcing and that kind of trust to help really go ahead and share with you what is that team thinking, where should you go. Maybe the PM doesn't have time to look at the competition every single day, but they have to. So, just using these different channels. And you can't do this every single day, right? So I love how you mentioned you get like an email basically every day or every week with what's going on. If you guys can systemize like these various inputs. So let's say that you want to talk to current and prospective customers like 2 times a month. Set up time 2 times a month to do that. If you can do more, wonderful. Partnering up to get a list of pain points. Many times the customer success team already does this for themselves. Just ask them to add to the distribution list, right? And keep a sense of that like every morning. Product marketing. Product marketing, you should be meeting up with them more regularly than the other teams, and if you're not, even set up like once a week time to understand what's going on with the competition, or again, ask them to send over any like key articles that they can. Analytics, you should be looking at every single day, and if you're not, that's something please start to do, because if you don't know what's going on with your product and your page and someone asks you a question, that is not great, right? And your roadmap and the prioritization can easily change due to the analytics. So we're going to go ahead and try this activity, and I'm going to give you guys 15 minutes. If you need more, I'll give it to you because we're going to go into a lot of depth. And please spend time thinking through this because this is the most essential piece to what we're going to be doing with actually crafting the roadmap and working on the working backwards documents after. So think about your product. Do it in whatever format you want to. What are the current gaps that you know of? Where did you get that information from? Was it you were just discovering, researching online? Did someone tell you? Was it a customer? And what impact is it, what metric is it impacting, right? So this particular bug needs to be solved by Q1 because of this particular CSAT issue, right? And you know this because like 90% of your customers have complained in the last month. After you've gone through this particular piece, are there any common like themes that you've seen as you guys have been writing out all of the various experience gaps? And then lastly, prioritize these themes and use those KPIs as a tool to help prioritize these themes in order of importance. So I'll actually give you 20 minutes because that is a lot. So there was a question I think, Elaine, you had asked around how do we ensure that we're communicating upwards, across, downwards, all that, right? So there is never going to be, just like all the other things that PMs are responsible for, there's no clear way to handle these situations. But there are different techniques that you can do. I really love that you all mentioned OKRs or some kind of a sync up that really goes back and hones in on what the intentions were, objectives. That's incredibly important. And you can phrase it as, metrics, KPIs, OKRs, whatever you want. But at the end of the day, you're telling that core story repeatedly. Make sure that you have a solid understanding with your core team. Beyond it, before doing anything else, right? Your core team, and whenever I say core team, it's your dev counterparts, your UX counterparts, if you're lucky to have a QA and a project or program manager, making sure that you're all in alignment. And meetings are always the bane of our existence, but let's be honest, we as PMs are going to have a lot of meetings, right? Like if you think you can escape it, I know people try blocking off their days of the weeks, that never works, in my opinion, because then the next day is like hell. However, just really invest and look at those meetings as like investing time into building relationships with your counterparts, right? And the way that I like to do it is, get out of the office. Like, go out for coffee. Sometimes when you're in the office, you have all of that mental baggage that you're taking on from all the other things that are going on. But if you can get out of the office, go to coffee, go to lunch with your counterparts, make sure that you're doing it at least on a weekly basis. That will ensure that at least you all are on the same page, right? And I don't know if any of you have had any other ways to really keep your other core team members together, but whether it's agile, using agile methodology, Kanban, whatever that may be, having regular sync-ups with your counterparts is incredibly important. And establishing, if you don't manage your engineers, making sure that you've developed relationships with them too, because many times the dev manager won't know everything, right? They're not going to know all the details, and they're not going to have time to explain all the details to you. So having a good relationship with your technical lead, your architect, and the other devs who are even junior is a healthy thing to do. And the cool part is that sometimes, like, I know UX teams don't like it if there are too many people in the room, right? And there's so many, we have technology now. We can either like look in a window, or we can like actually observe individuals, listen to them, join on a conference call, right? But I agree, like, we think that engineers don't care to listen to these things. They love it. Like, they love it, and I've had very junior engineers who on a weekend, because they were naturally bored, they would come and they'd be like, oh, we heard this on a customer call and we just fixed it. Like, we were eating dinner, we fixed it, right? And that's because we enabled them to listen in on a call, or we enabled them to be involved, and they were so happy that they did that initiative, they took that initiative. So another thing to add to that is like hackathons. Like, doing hackathons on a biannual basis is an amazing way to enable your engineering teams, or even UX or members from other teams as well, to come up with an idea that's going to impact a customer and come up with a solution that's like sustainable, right? So go ahead. So if you're willing to do hard work and invest a lot of time in the beginning, that will scale. And I'll kind of go into the different techniques. So if you're aligned with your team, wonderful. Making sure that they're also bought in. Making sure that when you've created the roadmap, they don't just suddenly see it on a presentation to the C-level execs or in all hands, right? Like, they know before you've presented it, they know what they're signing up for as well. And this happens way too often that the core team doesn't know what's actually going to happen. How do you actually take that now and disseminate it? So the first thing is product demos, right? Especially when it comes to internationalization. I don't know if your company has a mechanism to like have you as a PM actually talk through your feature, talk through the roadmap, record it, and then release it. Most small and big companies do have it. If you don't, you can create a very simple YouTube video and make it private, only have it accessible for your company, and literally just talk through the roadmap, right? Have a voiceover, go through screen by screen, and talk through the roadmap. That is scalable. You presenting 1,000 times is not scalable. But if you have this video, every time your roadmap's updated, go and make a refresher and post it to like a Confluence or post it to like an internal hub that this information can be shareable across your company. All right? So number one technique is product demos. Number two is, if you're a customer-facing company, having webinars that are those webinars that can be saved and replayed again, okay? Shopify does an amazing job of this. If you sign on to Shopify, if you want an example, sign on for anything that they ever do. They have the most brilliant way of like you feel like this is a live thing that's happening, but it's been done 2 years ago, you know? So really investing in having webinars that can be, again, taped and reused later on again. Training. This is all about investing time up front. After the roadmap has been completed, or you're even thinking about themes, or you want to brainstorm, every team usually has a meeting, right? Like you mentioned, your product team has a meeting, CS has a meeting, marketing has a meeting, etc. Invite yourself to that, present, get feedback, go back and disseminate the information like over an email or whatnot, right? Inviting yourself to the other teams' meetings, it takes time, it takes effort, but if you do that up front, you can save so much time after. Now, working backwards. Working backwards is what I'm going to go into after we talk a little bit about the templates. Working backwards is a technique that we use in order to have one document that is shared across 500 people in our team, okay? So we also deal with the same thing you do, where our team is only in America is like 500, and then when you look at other teams in other countries, it scales to around 2,000, right? So what Amazon has basically come up with is something called working backwards, where you say, all right, our customers want this. Our stakeholders will need to know all of these questions. And if we can create one document that might be like 6 to 10 pages long, this is like the Bible of what we're going to be having for our roadmap for this year. This is a document that is our stamp of approval. It's been stamped by the execs, it's been stamped by us, by our core team. If someone doesn't have time to join one of those meetings that we're presenting at, like when we're going and visiting other teams, too bad for them. They have this document that has been approved, they have to invest time to reading it. If they don't read it, that is their problem, okay? And if you can create a culture where you are, I went into this hating, like, I love writing personally, I hate writing when it comes to like work. Like, I just really do not like building decks and things like that, but I've found it to be so useful because you save yourself so much time at the end of the day. And we're gonna go into that more detail. I don't wanna talk about it in too vague of terms because the essence of it will be lost. But we start off with a press release, and then we're gonna go into like the ask questions, and then back it up with the roadmap and the appendix. So we'll go into that. But that is the best way, especially when you work for a large international company, to share your roadmap and your information. One more thing I wanted to add before moving on is you mentioned role definition. I have never worked at a company, no matter how big or small it is, that doesn't know what a product manager is. Even if they've hired a PM, and even if there are like 10, 12 PMs who work there, other teams still have no idea what product managers do, right? Yeah, or even with product marketers, and if you don't have a product marketing team, or if they're doing like things that are not really what we would think is product marketing, then it creates even more of a confusion, right? Every company I've had to work with has had to create a responsibility matrix. Have you all heard of the RASI methodology, right? So if you enter into a team, if you enter into a company, and you notice that there's a confusion around what a PM does, please take initiative and work with your leadership to create a chart where your role is specifically mentioned, because people will take advantage of you. They're not going to listen. They're not going to listen to your roadmap. You know, they'll throw shade. Like, it's not going to be a fun situation. And having that matrix from the beginning is incredibly important. Doesn't matter if you work for an Amazon, Weight Watchers, or a startup. I've had to do it at every place I've gone to. And everyone has a different definition of a product manager, right? Which will be a great starting point with your other product managers. The other thing is gaining empathy for your stakeholders. Now, have you all like done any of these Myers-Briggs or tests at all? What do you think about it? Like, what have you used it for, and has it been useful? Yeah.
It's useful to like know how you yourself work with others, but it's also like when you're reading up on like the results of tests, you're reading other ones
Yeah.
to kind of figure out what the other people around you might be and how to best communicate with them in their way.
Yeah. Being in like a personal relationship is just like that, right? Like you have to have an understanding as to this person is not you. So where are they coming from? What are their triggers? And these kinds of tests they're silly, they're nerdy, but they're so helpful. And there's so many free resources online. Like there's 16 personalities tests, which is like a free version of the Myers-Briggs stuff, right? The teams that I've been a part of, whether they're company-sponsored or team-sponsored or you're just talking to one of your stakeholders one-on-one, if you can get the other person to take this test, it's amazing because that's like a tool in your back pocket that you can always keep yourself in check. Like, hey, I know this person is, I don't know, more of a feeler than a thinker, so perhaps I shouldn't like go up to them after they've gotten beaten down by a customer, Like little things like that, it's just really helpful. And most of the companies I've worked with, they've actually had the different teams do it, and then they've shared what each person was amongst the core team so that you can have a better understanding of that too. All right, so the next piece we're gonna go into is different templates that you guys can use if you would like. I've shared this document again on the Slack channel, so when you have access to Wi-Fi, you can look at it, you can take it, you can amend it, however you want to use them. These are some of the templates that I've used that I like. Again, there's not one perfect solution. However, this has helped me telling the story behind what we want to do and why, roadmaps, etc. So I'm going to go into them in detail. I'm sorry that the screen is a little tiny right now, but I'll kind of speak to them. So when we had spoken about strategic focus areas, company goals, themes, this has helped me just tell the story, right, across our core teams and to stakeholder teams. So starting off at the top level with company goals and highlighting what has the business published. If you're a public company, most likely they've published this online to stakeholders, to investors, et cetera. So what are those strategic focus areas that the company is going for in this next fiscal year, all right? The next level down is those themes that you came up with I think, the second exercise. When you would come up with your particular product themes, what are those themes and what company goals are they connecting back to? All right? Again, you're just kind of creating this matrix, top down. Under every theme, having a little objective. Like, okay, you can say internationalization, but where particularly are you launching and why? Our objective is to expand into the European market because we understand that particular insurance market is ripe for disruption because of these reasons, right? That's the objective to why you're doing international expansion into Europe. That goes back into winning the mid-market for a new set of customers. So kind of connecting it back. Does this help? Does this make sense? Does it kind of align back to what we were talking about in the beginning, or do you all have questions about this particular template? Yeah?
So is the idea to tie each objective back to specific company goals?
Yeah. And kind of going to the first point, right? Like if you don't know where your company's headed, or if the company goals are very vague, then it's very difficult to justify your roadmap over time. That's where the hippos come in, and that's where you end up having conflict. So again, super simple, but this has helped over time. The next one is our favorite exercise, the stacked ranked priorities and why. What I didn't include here was like an area for KPIs, but because we had the other document, I never really use it. So having, again, all the items, understanding where the source came from, where the metric was for, and then the best part, which we haven't not discussed yet, what's the size of or the swag for this particular feature item, right? Working with your core team to understand, is it a large amount of effort, medium, small? These things mean different things to every team, to every company, to every product. So making sure that you as a core unit agree upon a large is probably going to be like I don't know, a month, or a large means a quarter, right? Like, what does that mean to you? And then having a legend, which is like on the top right side, that indicates what large, extra large, everything means, and going even further to indicate how long your sprints are. So we work off of 2-week sprints. Right? And if we say something is small, that means that we're going to be able to get it done within that particular sprint. Or if it's extra large, all right, 6 sprints, that could mean potentially a couple months. Yeah? And then that line for the cutoff is realistically, we can probably only do this many things. And be more conservative than riskier when it comes to your cutoff. And then the template. So again, super, super simple. Supporting documents will help your roadmap, but this is geared towards being directional. So starting off by being very, very specific, right? Like in Q4, breaking out every month, these are the particular priorities that you're going to focus on. Those priorities will connect back to these particular focus areas, and listing them out. Over time, in the first half and second half of like the next year, for instance, you can always just list off the high-level theme. Like, you don't have to go so deep into the priority, or even if you yourself know it, it's better to be a little bit vaguer when it comes to the directional outlook, because things are going to change, right? And most likely the solution to that will change because you might have discovered something new. So having more of a directional opinion, making it a little bit more thematic based, is better in the longer term, and in the shorter term, having it be very specific with what feature you're going to launch and when, why. And then this kind of goes back to what I just mentioned, is that if you want to dive in even deeper into each theme, then you can have this, because it will connect back to every roadmap item and where that roadmap item fell back on the previous slide. And the reason I like doing it this way is we've been through so many roadmaps, themes, templates. People try to push everything into one slide. It gets so confusing. No one can read it at the end of the day, and you end up having more questions to ask. So if you can break it up by telling this kind of a story, it's just more tools, again, in your back pocket. It's more scalable. You can change it. If you change one thing, you don't have to change like 10,000 things again. So it helps. And moving even further, if you want to explain it at a feature level, right? If you want to take all of those roadmap items and go into it even deeper, then, so again, I used to work with search and personalization. So you can take, what is the feature that you're looking to launch? When are you looking to launch it? What is that level of difficulty that will go back to your feature? So is it like a large, a medium, et cetera? What particular core company objective is this relating back to? Are there any dependencies? When are you launching it? What are your metrics? Who are your target users? And why? So again, you can use all of these. You can use one or two of these. This, to me, is incredibly helpful because everyone has questions. If you are a company that publishes your roadmap to customers, customers are going to have 1,000 questions, and either you can sit on the demos all the time and explain it to them. You can either tape it over a webinar, or you can have a deck that's published online, and you can go into this level of detail. Totally depends on your company culture, what your execs are okay with.
This is a fairly in the weeds question, but are you using, right now we're trying to do a roadmap system where we have everything in version 1 and then it rolls up and it's magically blah, blah, blah. Are you using a separate system that it's all just manually tracked?
Because we've used like AHA, we've used all the online tools, and there are some really good ones. Which one are you using? Oh, it's called version 1. I've never heard of that one before. Some of them are really good. It's just sometimes teams are just cheap and they don't want to invest in them, right? So if you have one that's really good that can do the different layers, that's amazing. But then you're going to have to obviously structure the way that you work towards them a little differently. I would still do the manual work up front because you don't want to have to go into the software like 1,000 times and update it, right? So if you do the manual work up front, you have it, and you can make slight changes after that. When we used AHA, or Product Plan was the other one we've used, we found it really hard to make changes later. And the other problem with these tools is that only specific teams have access to them at a particular time, which is terrible when you're trying to disseminate that information. right? So like customers are going to be able to view that. Many times sales doesn't have access to that, right? We've tried even using Salesforce to build our roadmaps. It's really difficult because you always have one team that doesn't have access to the same ones. So I'm a fan of doing it manually, even though it takes more time. It just saves you more time later.
So just a simple question I guess. If somebody said, can I see your roadmap? Do you pull up PowerPoint?
How to pull up this, yeah. And then it's on, yeah. I would just pull up, again, like PowerPoint is just one mechanism to create this, but it's just easier if you have these things ready already as artifacts. If Word is your artifact, whatever, Google Docs or PowerPoint, and this is like your main piece of it, and then the rest of them are all supporting documentation. Because people are gonna ask, okay, well, why are you doing it? Because it maps back to this goal. Well, what are they looking to learn? They're looking to learn this particular metric. Well, how did you prioritize? We prioritized it because of this reason, right? And like it's this big. So I'm a fan.
Well, when you do something like this, it's hard for upper management to argue with it because it's just objective and it has all this data.
Yeah.
They can't argue with, I mean, they can argue whatever they want, but it's harder for them to argue with something like
I guess they'll buy into it more.
Yeah.
If you can show this is why we're doing this,
Yeah.
it's credible.
So upper management, it's like this slide is for upper management, right? This slide is for normally sales, CS, other stakeholders. This slide is for everyone, but mostly for you. This slide is frankly for sometimes the devs, the engineers and the UX folks on your team want to have more details than you've already supplied in your roadmap, and this is great for that, to provide that additional layer. And then this feature level is wonderful for customers, for sales, for everyone as well. You can do even more if you're really ambitious and put like the sources that it came from, some top quotes, like data, et cetera, that can go in your appendix as well, but this is already, I know, a lot, so. Do you all have any questions on that before I go into the next one? All right, so resourcing. This may apply to some of you, not all, but many times you have to make a business case for why you need additional resources, right? And if you've done all the work up front of deep diving into why you need to have a particular thing done this year, and you've stack ranked your priorities, and you understand that you can get X amount done with your current team, if you have another line, like I usually work with my dev manager counterpart to do this, but if you want another best case scenario, like worst case scenario with the current resources we have and the current time we have, this is how much we can do. If you give us 2 more engineers, we can get to item number 20, right? And there are some companies that value listing this particular piece out when you have the roadmap done. Why? Because your leadership team will ask, well, why can't it be done tomorrow, right? Why can't it be done tomorrow? Because we need 4 more backend engineers. Why do we need that? Because of these particular reasons, right? And what are the other people working on? That your dev counterparts can help you supply that information. Resourcing is difficult because many times we don't have access to like how much budget our team has. So if you have access to that, put that here. If you don't, just take a swag at it, right? But having that best case scenario and worst case scenario lines are really helpful when you're trying to make a case to leadership. For things like program managers, again, depending upon your company, most companies undervalue program managers. They are incredibly important, but either like 1 or 2 teams will get it. And if a product manager is going and chasing like 20 teams and they're trying to align everyone, that's not allowing you to do your job, right? So that's a key gut feeling that, hey, if we had a program manager, it could help do this. Designers, again, like some teams have a shared resource pool of UX designers, which, when I started at Amazon Business, I had a designer who was like 1/4 dedicated to us, and we had to launch a complete design do-over in about a quarter. and she was able to dedicate 5 hours to us a week. So that's a pretty clear indication that I cannot do this, right? Like, I'm not going to go and start designing things. You don't want me to design things, and if you want me to, it's going to end up like this. So just kind of like that. I never really get into sales or CS or marketing or anything. So working backwards, this is one of the most critical things, in my opinion, to how you tell the story of your roadmap and why. Do you guys feel comfortable with where we are right now with just building and getting to the roadmap? Do you feel comfortable, or do you feel like there's anything missing so far? So we should hopefully all know this, that when you're going about a roadmap, and the reason I've spent so much time in the beginning talking about goals and KPIs is we're not looking at solutions, right? We shouldn't have even talked about solutions yet. It's good that your team can have opinions as to how we want to go about doing things, and you listen to your customers, but you should not have derived on a perfectly mandated technical solution as to how you're going to solve your problem yet. So one way to make sure that you're truly looking forward, you're looking at the customer, is to work backwards from your customer and make sure you have those data points ready. So this is something that, again, is a very Amazon way to do things, but it's been translated now into a lot of different companies across the world, particularly those who are within the e-commerce and SaaS spaces. So you basically start with your customer. You start with what your customer's thinking, what your sources have told you, what the data is saying, and you work backwards from there. Knowing what your theme is, your objective. If we know that we want to reduce drop-off on onboarding, and we know we have 1 quarter to determine this, and we know people are dropping off the onboarding process because there's 10 steps, right? What can we do to do that? How can we work backwards from the customer pain points and derive at a solution? So there's 2 sections to the working backwards documents. One is a press release, which is actually really fun to do, and the second is the FAQs, which I'm going to go into more detail. I'm sure you all have read press releases that your teams have laid out if you ever have a feature release or not, right? Usually the PMs are not the ones writing this, nor have they even seen the document before it goes out. Now, what if you could be in charge of how your feature launch is going to look like, right? Wouldn't that be amazing that you can actually tell the truth about what your feature is and like going out to the public? This particular document ensures that PMs have control over the story behind their feature release. Now, I don't know if you guys can see this. Can the table at the back see this at all? Yeah, okay. So the purpose of the press release is to take one of the themes that you're really interested in solving, doing due diligence across your various stakeholders, digging into your analytics and saying, hey, we know that onboarding is difficult. We know onboarding is difficult because of this verification process, because of this 10-step process. We also know it's not mobile compatible, right? So what is a particular trigger? Now, the press release helps us to narrow down a very concise story, and by doing this, it forces you to not jump to a conclusion right away. So let me dig into this a little bit more detail. Take one of the themes that you all looked at in the last section when you were thinking about like one of your top priorities, and start thinking about what are your customers' biggest pain points with that priority item and why. Think about the market, the competition, what are they doing? And then come up with a couple of ideas that you have as to how to approach that given the data that you have, the resources that you've acquired. Obviously, you don't have anything right now, just use your gut sense, make it up, right? If you were pitching it to a customer right now and you've launched it, what would a customer say is the best thing about this particular thing? Like, why have you saved them time and energy? Why have you made them happier? What would your leadership, what would your Jeff Bezos say about this particular item, right? How will your C-level executives really support you in this? And how is it easy to get started with this new implementation that you've done? So you're not necessarily looking at the solution, but you're taking a best shot as if you were your customer, what would you wish could be the solution to this problem? It doesn't have to be right, but it will help you to start thinking about that approach. Does that make sense? Yeah? So I'm going to pull the slide up, but again, what I just mentioned, take one of your top priorities from your last activity and put a PR together, all right? We're gonna go in, it doesn't have to be like 2 pages, just make it be a couple sentences. So normally the heading's like, 1 line, the subheading's like 2 lines, summary is like a paragraph, problem is a line, solution's a line, you can make up a glamorous quote. And then the most important one though is how to get started, and secondly, the call to action. All right, and if you have any questions at all, please let me know. All right, so no worries if you're not done. The reason that the press release is incredibly helpful is if you think about, in pragmatic marketing, they call, or product management as well, they call it like positioning statements, positioning documents, right? Again, every company, every theory has their own mechanism of doing this. However, the reason that a press release is really interesting and helpful is it forces you to be that person pitching. Normally we don't get to do that, right? It's given to another team to basically take all the hard work and make it so that a customer or someone's gonna buy the product and understand. But if you as a PM don't know how to do that, then that can be detrimental when it comes time to even demoing it or explaining it or making sure that other teams are well trained, right? The press release, I know there was a question around how do we stray from solutioning. By nature, it's hard to do that. We're gonna end up creating some kind of solutions, and this forces you to come up with a solution, right? But this document, after you've created it, it's meant to cause a debate. You take this document, you go to your core team, you say, this is, based upon our roadmap. Oh yes, it's working. At the end, it finally starts working, awesome. Based upon our roadmap that we set forth here, and this is looking like a quarter out, right? So the big ideas that you want clarity on. In the first half of 2018, we want to approach this particular theme, okay? Now, this particular theme can be solved in a variety of ways. And either you can go and you can have several meetings to have a brainstorm session where you sit and you brainstorm for like 4 hours, or you can just make a call, create a doc, explain what your gut says, back it up with sources, right? That customer quote should be a customer quote that you've heard of before. Talk about the problem, where the problem came from, and use this document as a means to start a debate, right? The debate should be first started with your core team, with your dev partner, with your QA partner, program manager, etc. Once you have all agreed on what are some solutions to this customer problem and why, then it's time to back it up with an FAQ section. The FAQ section, because we're all very used to what our counterparts will ask us, right? We know with our gut what sales will ask us. We know what leadership will want to know. We know what marketing will want to know. And if we're new, we're going to learn. So the FAQs, after you've agreed upon this press release with your core team, the FAQs is basically, we call it a 2-pager, but it's never a 2-pager. It ends up being a lot longer. But literally think about, like, if you could sit down for an hour and think about what are all the questions I will be asked about this particular feature or theme that I want to approach in the first half of 2018 and how we're going to be solving this, what would all those questions be? This is the section to do it. And the FAQs are divided up into, all of us as feature teams or as product teams are going to have different stakeholders. So if you're working on integrations, you're going to have partners who are going to be asking you questions about when you're going to integrate with, when I was doing e-commerce, we were going to do omni-channel. When are we going to integrate with a new omni-channel partner, right? So like that could be a particular stakeholder that you have to answer questions for, or your C-level executives, or your direct engineering team, or sales. Write all of them down. It is so useful because when it comes to scaling yourself, this is what will scale itself. Once you've done a first pass at creating your FAQs, then you take those leaders from the different partner teams, from marketing, from sales, from CS, and you show them this doc, right? And if you can champion this kind of thinking within your product org, it makes, again, scaling so much easier because you won't have to do all those retrainings and re-explaining sessions over and over again. And this always backs up your roadmap. So you might be thinking like, this is a lot of work that we're doing upfront just to like explain what we want to do in this year, but guess what? Like, if you have your clear roadmap set up, if you backed it up with customer data, you backed it up with analytics, and you can present a very clear thought of case as to why you want to do each one of these themes, who can really argue with that, right? Yes, you will have hippos who will come and argue. However, you've mitigated a lot of the tension that you might have received with partner teams, right? Or even with having that clarity yourself as to why do I want to do this. So the FAQ section comes up later. You continue to amend it over time, and then the way that we normally do it is we'll present it to like the main leaders within all these partner teams at once, get their questions, make sure that we've added all their new questions to this document, and then once we're done with it, we publish it again on Confluence or whatever open communication system you have. We've trained each team once, and then this is their live artifact. And if they have any questions, they can ask you. So. The activity that I have is basically like writing out who your main stakeholders would be and starting to take a crack at some of your questions. So awesome. All right, so if any of you are interested in seeing how FAQs and press releases are laid out, I can, and if you email me, I'll give you my email at the end. I'm more than happy to email you like actual examples of what I've done that are public that you can see and you can utilize if you'd like. I didn't want to share it here, it's a lot of information, but if you email me separately, I'm more than happy to do that. And it really is a useful tool. Like the amount of time at the end that it's saved and just disseminating that information out is probably one of the best things that I've had over time. Just to wrap up, and obviously you guys are hungry and you're ready to go, but just remember that whoever tells you there's one set way to do a roadmap is it's false, right? Like there are so many different ways, and you can probably use these templates and make it your own, and you will make it your own over time. Just continue to have a flexible mindset. Remember that just because you change your roadmap doesn't mean that it's wrong or it's failed. Roadmaps are meant to change. If you're able to arrive at least the next quarter out and be specific on that, you have succeeded, in my opinion. Any further than that, it's incredibly difficult to do. There's just so many things that could happen in that process, right? Business drivers could change, your company could go in a new direction, teams could get restructured, you yourself could have found a new discovery in the data or by customer feedback that you say this is another way to solve the problem. So just be incredibly particular about that. Communication boils down to investment of time, right? If you're willing to do that upfront, you will save a lot of heartache after. And if your company does it one way, be that person who is willing and able to make that change. If you feel like there's a new process that you can instill, do it. Because again, it could be harder in the beginning, but people want their lives and their jobs to be better, and they want their lives and jobs to be easier. So if you can take any of these learnings and apply them, wonderful. Again, I am going to be available until 12:30, so if you all have any questions at all, and then this is my email, LinkedIn, Twitter handle. Reach out if you have any questions at all, more specific questions regarding your product, your feature, your company. And again, I've shared this deck within the Slack channel under this particular presentation time. So whenever you have Wi-Fi, check it out. I will keep it up. And yeah, thank you guys for coming. I appreciate it.